Some moments don't make noise. They don't shout. They don't explode. They just break you quietly. This was supposed to be a Christmas party. Lights, laughter, family. But before the night ended, one man would sign away a life he once promised forever, and everyone would remember this Christmas. For the wrong reason. Asterisk. His name was Daniel. Daniel stood near the edge of the living room, holding a glass he hadn't touched for minutes. The Christmas tree glowed behind him, wrapped in memories he didn't know how to face anymore. People laughed. Someone told a joke. A child ran past with wrapping paper still stuck to their sock, and Daniel smiled, not because he felt happy, but because he didn't want anyone to ask why he wasn't. He had practiced that smile for months. The sweater he wore was red. She bought it for him 3 Christmases ago. She said it made him look safe. He wondered when he stopped being that. The music played softly in the background. Old Christmas songs, the kind that talk about home, warmth, togetherness. Each lyric felt like it was written for someone else's life. Daniel adjusted his sleeves again. His hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from cold, from knowing the envelope was still on the table, white, thin, quiet. It didn't look powerful, but Daniel knew better. That envelope carried years of silence, unfinished conversations, nights where they slept facing opposite walls, mornings where goodbye meant nothing at all. Divorce papers don't destroy marriages. They just arrive after everything else already has. Someone clinked a glass and asked Daniel to say a few words, just something nice. Just a Christmas toast. Daniel stood up slowly. The room turned toward him. And for the first time that night, he felt seen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. He looked down. And that's when everyone noticed the papers in his hand. The room went quiet, not the awkward kind. The heavy kind. The kind where everyone realizes they've walked into something private. But it's already too late to leave. Daniel tried to speak again. His voice broke. And when the tears came, they didn't rush. They fell slowly, honestly. A grown man, crying on Christmas, over a signature that would erase his shared last name. He remembered the beginning, the way she laughed, too loud in crowded rooms, the way she held his arm like she was afraid the world might steal him away. They promised forever like it was easy. Nobody tells you that love doesn't usually end in fire. It ends in quiet. Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve. The pen felt heavier than it should have. He thought about the mornings they stopped asking how each other slept, the nights where silence replaced arguments, the days where love became a responsibility instead of a feeling. This wasn't a sudden ending. This was a slow goodbye that took years. The pen touched the paper, and everything inside him screamed to stop. He thought about Christmas mornings, shared jokes, inside stories no one else would ever understand. But he also thought about the loneliness, about feeling invisible in his own home. And for the first time, he chose truth over hope. Daniel signed, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a simple motion of ink across paper, and somehow that small movement changed his entire life. No one clapped. No one spoke. Someone quietly turned the music back on. Christmas continued, but Daniel knew something had ended forever. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the lights were dimmed, Daniel sat alone in the living room. The tree still glowed. The house still smelled like food and pine, but the room felt larger. Emptier. He folded the papers carefully, not out of respect for the law, but for the life they once represented. This wasn't a story about divorce. It was a story about what happens when love isn't loud enough to save itself. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do on Christmas is let go. Asterisk. The house didn't feel angry after everyone left. It felt tired. Daniel stood near the doorway for a long time after the last goodbye. Coats disappeared. Shoes echoed down the steps. Laughter faded into the cold night. And then nothing. The silence didn't rush in. It waited, like it had been patient all along. Daniel turned off the music. The quiet that followed was heavier than the crying had been. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the Christmas tree. The lights blinked slowly. Red, green, gold. He remembered buying that tree together. They argued about its height. She wanted taller. He wanted practical. They laughed about it. Afterward, he couldn't remember the last time they laughed like that. Daniel loosened his tie and let it fall to the floor. It landed. Softly. Everything did tonight. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. Just things ending without a sound. He walked into the kitchen. The cookies were still on the counter. Half eaten. One broken in two. She used to bake every Christmas Eve, said. It made the house feel alive. Daniel realized the house had been quiet long before. Tonight, he poured himself a glass of water and stared at his reflection in the window. 30-8 years old. Not broken. Not weak. Just tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. He tried to remember when he stopped telling her about his day. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't one moment. It was 100 small decisions to stay quiet. Instead of honest. Their bedroom door was open. Daniel stood there but didn't go in. The bed was neatly made, her side untouched. She'd moved her things weeks ago, carefully, politely. She was a guest leaving early. He sat on the floor instead, back against the bed, head resting on the mattress. He remembered lying there once, years ago, laughing about nothing important, back when being together felt like enough. People think love ends because of betrayal, or shouting, or slammed doors, but sometimes it ends because two people stop reaching for each other, and neither knows how to start again. Daniel closed his eyes. And memories came without asking. The first apartment, the terrible paint color, the nights they ate dinner on the floor because they didn't own a table yet. They were happy then. Not because life was easy, but because they faced it together. He wondered when together became optional. The clock ticked toward midnight. Christmas day was coming. Daniel stood up slowly and turned off the tree. Lights. The room darkened. Instantly. It felt honest. He slept on the couch that night. Not because the bed hurt, but because it felt like borrowing something that wasn't his anymore. Sleep came in pieces, short, restless, filled with dreams that didn't finish. Morning arrived quietly. No alarm, no voices, no excitement. Just pale winter light slipping through the curtains. Daniel sat up and rubbed his face. For a moment, he forgot. Then reality settled in again. He made coffee. 1 cup. That hurt more than he expected. Outside, snow had started to fall. Soft, slow. The world looked peaceful. Unaware. Daniel wrapped himself in a jacket and stepped onto the porch. The air burned his lungs. It felt good. Across the street, a family laughed while loading gifts into a car. A child waved. Daniel waved back. He didn't feel jealous. He felt distant, like he was watching life through glass. He thought about calling her, just to say a Merry Christmas. Just to hear her voice. He held the phone. Then set it down. Some goodbyes don't need to be repeated. Daniel sat back inside, staring at the unopened presents beneath the tree. One had his name on it. Her handwriting, careful, familiar. He opened it slowly. Inside was a framed photo. Them. Years ago, smiling like the future was guaranteed. On the back, she had written, "Thank you for the years we tried." Daniel exhaled. Not in anger, not in despair. In acceptance. This was what love looked like at the end. Not hatred. Not blame. Just gratitude mixed with sadness. He placed the photo on the shelf. Not hidden. Not displayed. Just present. Like the memories. Christmas morning passed quietly. Daniel didn't feel healed. He didn't feel hopeful, but he felt something new. Honest. Life wouldn't restart tomorrow. It would continue. Slowly. Awkwardly. One ordinary day at a time, and somewhere in the quiet between the grief and the relief, Daniel realized something important. Letting go didn't mean the love was fake. It meant it was real enough to hurt when it ended. Asterisk. The days after Christmas didn't arrive with lessons. They arrived quietly. Daniel returned to work because staying home felt worse. Emails waited. Meetings continued. Life didn't pause just because his had cracked open. People asked how his holiday was. He said it was fine, not because it was true, but because explaining felt impossible. Evenings were the hardest. The apartment echoed now. Every sound lasted longer than it should have. Daniel learned how loud silence could be. When it had nothing left to compete with, he cooked for one, ate standing sometimes, left dishes in the sink longer than usual. Not from laziness. From adjustment. He found her hair tied behind the couch one night. Black, stretched thin. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. He sat on the floor, holding it longer than he meant to. Then he threw it away. Gently. Healing didn't feel like progress. It felt like learning how to carry weight without dropping it. Some mornings he woke up ready. Some mornings he stayed still, staring at the ceiling, waiting for courage to show up. It always did, just not on schedule. Friends invited him out. He declined most of the time. Crowds felt overwhelming. Laughter felt borrowed. But one night he said yes, a quiet bar. Soft music. Nothing to celebrate. Just people being people. He listened more than he spoke. It felt good not to explain himself. No one asked about the papers, or the tears, or Christmas. They talked about movies, about work, about weather, normal things. Daniel realized how much he missed. Normal. Weeks passed. Winter softened. The city changed color, and slowly, so did he. He began walking in the mornings. Same route. Same time. Routine became a kind of anchor. He noticed small things again. Steam rising from coffee shops. Dogs pulling their owners forward. The way sunlight touched buildings before reaching the street. Life hadn't ended. It had narrowed. And within that narrow space, there was room to breathe. One afternoon, Daniel found himself laughing. It surprised him. The sound felt unfamiliar, but real. And for the first time since the party, he didn't feel guilty for it. He packed away the Christmas decorations in February, not because it was time, but because he was ready. Held the ornament she loved. Most off the glass one, the fragile one. He wrapped it carefully. Love doesn't disappear when people do. It just changes shape. Daniel stopped checking his phone so often. Stopped waiting for messages that weren't coming. Not because he stopped caring, but because caring didn't require waiting anymore. Spring arrived quietly. Again. One morning, Daniel sat on a park bench, watching children play. He didn't imagine a different past. He imagined a different future. Not specific. Not perfect, just possible. Papers were still in a drawer at home. He hadn't burned them, hadn't hidden them. They existed. Like the truth. Daniel learned something important over time. Closure isn't a moment. It's a series of small choices. To get up, to eat, to go outside, to keep living. On the anniversary of that Christmas, Daniel didn't feel sad. He felt reflective. He lit a candle. Not for her. Not for himself, but for the years they shared. For the version of them that tried. And as the flame flickered, Daniel understood. Some love stories don't end in togetherness. They end in understanding. He turned off the light and the room didn't feel empty anymore. Just quiet. Asterisk, here's a moment people don't talk about. The moment after healing starts. But before you believe it's real. Daniel found himself there more than once, standing in grocery aisles, staring at shelves longer than necessary, driving with the radio off, just listening to the sound of tires on the road, sitting in rooms that no longer felt haunted, but still felt unfamiliar. This was the in-between, and it was quieter than pain. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. The sky was already dark. He stood in the doorway, keys still in his hand, and realized something strange. He didn't feel rushed. There was no one waiting, no one expecting, no one disappointed. For the first time, the silence didn't accuse him. It accepted him. He poured a drink and sat by the window. Below, the city moved the way it always had. Cars passed. People laughed. Someone argued. Someone fell in love. Life kept happening without asking his permission, and Daniel finally let it. He thought back to that Christmas night, the lights, the envelope, the weight of the pen. He realized something important. That moment didn't define him. It revealed him. It showed him how deeply he could feel, how honestly he could grieve, how strong he was when there was no audience left. Pain had introduced him to himself, and now he was learning how to live with that knowledge. Daniel cleaned out the drawer one afternoon. Old papers, receipts, expired, warranties, and there they were. The divorce papers, folded, unremarkable. He held them without shaking. That's how he knew something had changed. He didn't tear them up. He didn't relive the night. He placed them back, not because they still mattered, but because they no longer controlled the room. That night, Daniel slept deeply. No dreams, no restlessness, just rest. Months passed. Life widened again. He spoke more, listened better, learned how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. He wasn't searching for love. He was learning how to be present. One afternoon, someone asked him a simple question: "Are you okay now?" Daniel thought for a long moment. Then he answered honestly, "I'm real now." And that was enough. The next Christmas came quietly. No party, no crowd. Just a small tree, soft lights, a simple meal. Daniel sat alone, but he wasn't lonely. There's a difference people only learn the hard way. He raised a glass. Not to the past, not to the pain, but to the courage it took to walk through it. If you're listening to this, if you've ever sat in a room full of people and felt alone, if you've ever signed something that broke your heart, if you've ever smiled just to survive the moment, know this: endings don't mean you failed. Sometimes they mean you stayed long enough to be honest. Daniel turned off the lights that night. The tree glowed softly. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like peace. Asterisk, the strange thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. Daniel didn't wake up one day and decide he was healed. There was no moment of victory, no sudden clarity. It arrived the way dust settles, slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize the air feels lighter. He began noticing time again, not the way it dragged during grief, but the way it moved forward without resistance. Mornings felt usable. Evenings no longer demanded survival. He stopped counting days since things ended. That number had lost its importance. Sometimes memories still surfaced, not sharp ones. Soft ones. The way she laughed when surprised, how she mispronounced certain words on purpose, the habit she had of touching his arm when she wanted attention. These memories didn't hurt anymore. They simply existed, like photographs you don't look at often, but don't throw away either. Daniel learned something quietly powerful. Pain insists on being understood, but peace asks for permission to stay. One afternoon, while reorganizing a shelf, Daniel found an old notebook. Her handwriting filled the pages. Plans, ideas, half-finished thoughts. He didn't rush to close it. He read slowly, not with longing, but with respect. This had been a life shared, and shared lives leave evidence. He closed the notebook and placed it back, not because it was too painful, but because it had served its purpose. People assume moving on means forgetting. Daniel learned it means remembering differently. The city changed seasons. Again, summer came. Heat pressed against windows. Voices filled the streets late into the night. Daniel spent more time outside, cafes, parks, long walks without destinations. He wasn't looking for replacement. He was reclaiming presence. Sometimes strangers spoke to him. Brief conversations, nothing significant, but they reminded him that connection didn't have to be permanent to be real. One evening, he sat on his balcony as rain began to fall. Not a storm, just rain. He didn't go inside. He let it soak his shirt. Let it remind him that not everything uncomfortable needed to be avoided. There are versions of ourselves that only appear after loss, quieter versions, wiser ones. Daniel met that version slowly. He liked him. He realized something else too. Grief had narrowed his world, but clarity had expanded it. He knew what he would no longer accept, what he would protect, what he would speak aloud next time. Pain had refined him. One night, Daniel dreamed not of her, but of himself, walking forward. No destination. Just movement. He woke up calm. The future no longer frightened him, not because it was guaranteed, but because he knew he could survive uncertainty. And if you're listening to this story wondering when things truly change, they change when silence stops feeling like punishment. They change when being alone feels honest. They change when you stop waiting for life to return to what it was and allow it to become what it is. Daniel didn't rebuild his life. He reshaped it. Carefully. Intentionally. With room for breath. And somewhere in that quiet reshaping, he became whole again, not untouched, but intact. Asterisk. Daniel discovered that time doesn't heal in the way movies show. It doesn't erase the past. It teaches you how to carry it differently. He spent mornings sitting by the window, watching leaves drift lazily on the wind. Each one reminded him that movement is inevitable. Some fall early, some hold on, but all eventually reach the ground. He wondered what it meant to fall gracefully, to let go without bitterness, to accept endings as necessary, not cruel. He began writing again, not for anyone to read, not to relive pain, but to observe himself, each word a marker of thought, each sentence a small attempt to understand the vastness of being alive after loss. Daniel wrote about the Christmas party, about the envelope, about the exact moment he signed the papers, but he didn't dwell on shame. He focused on discovery. I didn't fail, he wrote. I stayed long enough to understand. And in that act of reflection, he realized something profound. Life doesn't demand perfection. It demands honesty, and honesty often feels heavy. He walked along the city streets in the evenings. Not crowded streets, but quiet avenues. Streetlights casting gold onto wet asphalt. Daniel noticed small things, the way shadows curved. The distant hum of music in a neighbor's apartment. The smell of bread from a bakery that had opened early that morning. It struck him that beauty often goes unnoticed. That life continues in soft, invisible ways, even when tragedy shapes your interior world. Sometimes he would pause and ask himself hard questions. What is life if not a series of moments like this? If grief and joy are intertwined, can one exist without the other? And then he would watch a bird land on a lamppost and answer himself simply, life exists. That's enough for now. Daniel started leaving his apartment more frequently, not to seek love or distraction, but to witness existence. A market bustling, children laughing, a couple arguing playfully. All of it reminded him that the world didn't pause for heartbreak. It only paused for those willing to notice Dot in these quiet observations. Daniel noticed a subtle truth. Humans are defined not by what they lose, but by how they perceive what remains. He reflected on his marriage, on the years he spent trying to hold something together that had quietly shifted. Not because they stopped caring, but because caring requires constant effort, and not all effort is sustainable. The realization didn't anger him. It enlightened him. Winter faded into spring. Blossoms arrived. Rain fell soft and deliberate. Daniel sat in the park one morning, watching a child attempt to ride a bicycle. The child fell, scraped knees, tears. And got up. Daniel smiled. Because that is what life asks of everyone. Fall, get up, continue. He thought about the Christmas party again. The envelope, the tears, the quiet acceptance. He realized that moment was not the end of life. It was the beginning of awareness. Life is not about the disasters that strike. It is about witnessing them, then moving forward with consciousness intact. Some nights he would lie awake, think of questions that have no answers. Is happiness a fleeting shadow? Is grief a teacher or a prison? Are we defined by love or by the absence of it? The answers didn't matter. The act of questioning did. Reflection became ritual, a nightly meditation, a commitment to experience rather than resist. Daniel began noticing small joys again. Coffee brewed perfectly, a neighbor's dog greeting him every morning, the wind shifting before a storm, snowflakes in late spring storms that no one else expected. Each small observation stitched his fragmented world back together. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to survive, enough to feel alive. He returned to writing, this time more philosophical. Life is the space between falling and rising. Love is the weight we carry through that space. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Words became companions. They didn't fix the past. They didn't promise the future, but they gave him context, meaning, perspective. Daniel learned to walk through silence, not as an absence, but as a presence. Not as emptiness, but as a canvas. Some days, grief would return, softly, unexpectedly, like a visitor who shows up without knocking. And he would sit with it. Not fight, not flee, simply exist with it, and then it would leave. He realized the human condition is neither to avoid pain nor to seek constant happiness. It is to witness, to feel, and to interpret. Each day, small choices guided him, to stand in the rain instead of hiding, to greet strangers instead of avoiding, to acknowledge memory instead of erasing it. Through these small acts, Daniel was learning how to be whole again, and the philosophical reflection that carried him. Life doesn't pause for grief. It doesn't wait for healing. It keeps moving. Our task is not to escape it, but to move with it consciously, to be aware, to exist, to breathe, even when the heart feels heavy. Daniel sat on the balcony one last time that winter evening. The city lights blurred through a soft drizzle. The cold air filled his lungs, and for the first time in months, he felt nothing pressing. No weight, no obligation, no invisible chains from the past. He realized something he had ignored for too long. Life is not about repairing what's broken. It's about embracing what remains, not holding on to loss, but noticing what still breathes around you. He looked down at the streets. People rushed past him. Children laughed. Dogs barked. Somewhere, someone argued. Somewhere else, someone kissed. Daniel understood that this is the rhythm of existence. It moves forward, indifferent to pain, yet full of quiet lessons for those willing to see. He thought of the Christmas party, the envelope, the pen, The tears that night was not a failure. It was a mirror. It revealed courage he didn't know he had, a heart capable of deep feeling, a life that could continue after the unthinkable. Daniel closed his eyes, and for a long moment, he just breathed. No memories, no what-ifs, no regrets. Just the present, the simple, unadorned present. He understood something essential. We are not defined by endings. We are defined by how we carry ourselves through them, by the honesty with which we live the aftermath, by our capacity to feel, reflect, and continue. He returned inside. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt like a place of quiet possibility, a room where life could exist on its own terms. Daniel picked up the notebook she had left behind. He flipped through it, not for memories, but for insight. The words spoke not of loss, but of understanding, of impermanence, of the beauty in fleeting moments. That night, as he lay down, he realized healing is not linear. It does not come with fireworks or applause. It comes softly, in repeated choices to exist fully, to witness without judgment, to accept without surrender. He let the silence settle around him, not as emptiness, not as absence, but as space to breathe, space to grow, space to become someone whole again. Daniel smiled faintly, not because life was perfect, not because the past didn't hurt, but because he had survived it, because he had learned how to live with it. And in that survival, he found something more valuable than joy, more enduring than grief: awareness, presence, wisdom. Some lessons do not arrive loudly. Some revelations do not need applause. Some truths linger quietly in the heart, waiting until we are ready. Daniel understood this now, and in that understanding, he found peace. The camera of your imagination lingers on him. A man alone, but not lonely. A life marked by endings, but defined by reflection. A heart that remembers, yet moves forward. Some stories do not need a climax. They need honesty. They need reflection. They need the quiet weight of awareness. And as the screen fades to darkness in your mind, one final thought remains. Life does not pause for grief. Life does not wait for healing. Life continues. And we are measured not by the moments we lose, but by how fully we inhabit the ones we keep. Asterisk. The weeks that followed felt like the slow unfolding of a book whose ending had been whispered, but never fully read. Daniel began noticing the small rituals of life again. The first coffee of the morning steaming in his hands, the sound of distant laughter bouncing off city walls, the subtle scent of flowers in the corner of the park where children played. Each detail seemed minor, insignificant, yet they were markers of time. And time was moving, quietly, insistently, patiently. He walked streets he had passed countless times before, but this time with awareness. He observed the way sunlight hit the cobblestones, the way wind carried scraps of paper across the sidewalks, the way birds performed delicate dances in the air, oblivious to human struggle. And he realized life was continuing, not despite the pain, but alongside it. Memories came unbidden, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft. A laughter shared over burnt toast, a hand held during a storm, a promise whispered late at night that once felt infinite. Daniel allowed himself to feel them fully now, not with longing, not with regret, but with recognition. They were part of him, but they did not define him. He returned to his apartment one rainy afternoon and found the old piano. It hadn't been played in years. Dust covered the keys, but when he pressed them gently, they produced a tentative melody. At first, it was awkward, uncertain, like a life relearning itself. But soon, the notes formed a pattern, soft, imperfect, yet alive. He realized creation could exist alongside grief. Joy could exist alongside memory. Neighbors began to notice Daniel again. A smile in the hallway, a nod in the elevator, a casual hello in the park. Small connections, almost trivial, but they reminded him that isolation is a choice and presence is an act of courage. He wrote letters he never sent. To her, to himself, to the future versions of people he hoped to become. Each word was carefully chosen, each sentence a meditation on existence, on impermanence, on the human capacity to endure. The seasons turned. Spring became summer. Summer became fall. Leaves fell again, this time with less sorrow, more contemplation. Daniel learned the rhythm of letting go, not through grand gestures, not through dramatic declarations, but through small, deliberate acts of attention to life, to the moment, to himself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, he sat on his balcony watching the lights flicker, watching people move in patterns that seemed chaotic yet beautiful. He understood finally, life is not a problem to be solved. It is a phenomenon to be observed, to be experienced fully, to be felt deeply without demanding answers, without demanding perfection. Daniel smiled faintly. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel complete. He felt aware. He felt present. He felt real. And in the quiet awareness, he discovered the truest form of resilience, not the absence of pain, but the ability to continue living richly in spite of it. Evenings passed differently now. He listened to the wind, the rain, the distant city hum. He read, he wrote, he walked. He even laughed softly, unpredictably, like someone discovering life's melodies for the first time. He realized happiness was not a constant state. It was a series of moments, fleeting, fragile, and beautiful precisely because they could not last forever. In the long quiet of his apartment, Daniel finally felt an alignment he had not known since before the Christmas party. The past was present, but it no longer ruled him. The future was unknown, but it no longer terrified him. He had survived. He had reflected. He had learned. And in that learning, he found something more profound than joy, more lasting than sorrow, understanding, acceptance, presence. And in that moment, Daniel understood the deepest truth of all. Life is neither fair nor predictable. Pain and beauty exist side by side. We are measured not by what we lose, but by how fully we inhabit the spaces we are given.